Okay, so today I want to talk about Jeremiah chapter 38. In this chapter, we're going to talk about the fact that fortune doesn't favor the bold, God favors the bold. What do I mean by that? People often say fortune as if it's some foreign God. And really, it's just a concept. Like, I don't know, we have a lot of concepts that just stray away from the idea of a God and more so like the universe, right? For example, fortune favors the bold, the universe will help you out, right? So on and so forth. I don't know all of them because I don't really care, but there's a lot of sayings that often point to some kind of higher intelligence, but they don't point to God, they point to something else. Anyway, long story short story, Jeremiah 38. In Jeremiah 38, you have to understand before this that Jeremiah was a great prophet. Not great in the sense that he was a great man, but great in the sense that he was great as in he did a lot of prophesying. Now, this was through God, of course, but that's why he was a great prophet, not because of anything he did, because of how the messages he sent from God. The word great that I'm using and the word great used in context does not always mean the quality of the person, but what they did and what they did through God, really. For example, Jerusalem was a great city because God allowed it to be. It was a great city, great as in big, right? Long story short, we're going to talk about Jeremiah 38. In Jeremiah 38, we talk about the fact that Jeremiah is prophesying again to the people of Jerusalem. He's telling them about the fact that they're not going to win this fight. As a matter of fact, he says this. He says, and I'll quote this too: even if you were to defeat entire army, the entire Babylonian army that is attacking you, and only wounded men will like. So I'll quote this too. Jeremiah 37, chapter 10. Even if you were to defeat the entire Babylonian army that is attacking you, and only wounded men were left in their tents, they would come out and burn this city down. So that is him telling, and that's in chapter 37. That's a chapter right before this one. That is him being direct in telling them there is nothing you're going to do to stop them from doing what they're doing, because I'm making them do it, because you guys have been so disobedient to me, and I can't keep having this, because you guys need to learn something. You guys have to suffer consequence, right? Anyway, so long story short story, people think that Jeremiah is on the side of the Babylonians because he keeps on talking about how they're going to win, but he's not doing it because he thinks they're going to win. He's doing it because God's telling him they're going to win. He's warning them. He's telling them if they surrender, they will all spare their lives. It's going to suck for them because they're going to be prisoners of war, but their lives will be spared, right? And one of the captain guards arrests Jeremiah because he says that he's deserting them for the Babylonians, right? He says, I'm not. I'm trying to let you know what God's telling me, right? So they trap him. They put him in prison. He eventually goes to a different prison in a cistern because they think that he's still talking about it, right? He's allowed. They trapped him the first time in a prison, but since he was not in prison yet, he was allowed to walk around among the people and talk to them. But he was still prophesying the same message that God told him to. So they said, okay, well, you're discouraging the soldiers and the people. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in a cistern. Now, one of the officials at the royal palace, his name is Ebed Melech. He's a Cushite. He says, okay, Zedekiah, you need to get him out of that cistern. Nothing he did was wrong. He's only doing what God has told him to do. So the wicked people who told you to put him in that cistern, who told him he was right, you need to ignore what they said and get him out. So the king says, okay, take 30 people and go get him out. Now, something you gotta learn about this king, he's very scary. He's a scared person because if he was really a king and he understood who the real God was, which he does understand, but he's very afraid. He's too afraid to act on things in his own way. So instead of him going personally and doing it, he has him do it. He has the person who suggested the idea to do it, even though it was suggested to him to do it. So he has him take 30 men and go get Jeremiah out. He secretly calls Jeremiah and says, anything you say to me right now will stay between us, but I need to know, and you need not lie to me. Are they going to win? Jeremiah says, yeah, they're going to win. Your life will be spared if you surrender. If you don't, then everything you have will be lost, and you will die. He swears an oath to Jeremiah that he will not tell anyone about the conversation. But he also tells Jeremiah this: you cannot tell anyone this conversation was had by you and me, because otherwise they will kill you. Right? So here are the things we need to learn from this king. He was a very scared person. Because he was scared, he wasn't doing what God was telling him to do. What God was telling him to do through the prophet. Right? Maybe God wasn't speaking directly to him using a voice, but he was definitely speaking to him through Jeremiah. But he was still too scared to do a lot of things. Right? So, again, we have to learn to not be afraid of things, because that doesn't benefit us anyway. Being afraid, and here's the thing, you can be afraid, but you can't let that stop you from doing things. For example, you can't be afraid to ask questions. You have to keep asking questions, even if it makes you look stupid. Sometimes you're going to look stupid, but that's just how it is. There's a consequence to everything. The consequence of the king is that, who knows, maybe he didn't have to lose everything. Maybe he could have lost less. But they've gotten to a point where they're literally at war with them. They're at their doorstep. They could have surrendered way earlier. They could have listened to Jeremiah way earlier, but they decided to wait until day of, right? There's a lot of things that could have gone better if they would have just listened. Like beforehand, Jeremiah actually wrote scripts to the king. I say scripts because that's the best one that comes to mind. He wrote down to the king what would happen, and it was disregarded, right? So Jeremiah's been prophesying this message for a long, long time. And what he did to Jeremiah, and what he allowed the people to do to Jeremiah was wrong. He knew that was a prophet of God because he was the only prophet who, as opposed to the other prophets who were telling them that they were going to win against the Babylonians, he was the only one who was telling them, yeah, they're wrong. God says otherwise, right? And it's not like Jeremiah was a bad prophet before. Well, the prophets are only as good as what they say comes true. That's what determines a prophet, by the fact that they're predicting something, right? So, long story short story, he was a weak king. He was a weak person because he allowed those people to do what they did to Jeremiah. And he was so weak after that that he had to promise Jeremiah that he wouldn't tell them what happened, right? Like scrolling down to the very end, right? This is what he says to Jeremiah. Do not let anyone know about this conversation or you may die. If the officials hear that I talk with you and they come to you and say, tell us what they said to the king and what the king said to you. Do not hide it from us or we will kill you. Then tell them, I was pleading with the king not to send me back to Jonathan's house to die there. All the officials did come to Jeremiah and question him, and he told them everything the king had ordered him to say. So they had no more to say to him, for no one had heard this conversation with the king, right? So, again, you don't want to be like this king. You want to be better than this king. You want to be better than everyone in the Bible mentioned. As cool as we think the people in the Bible are mentioned, we want to be better than them. Because if we're better than them, we're close with God, right? So, if you are afraid, still do what you have to do, right? If you're afraid because you have social anxiety to ask questions, or you're afraid of looking stupid, or you think that, for whatever reason, you should know what you need to know already, or that you think something bad will happen, that might be the case, but you have to do it. You have to do it. You can't be afraid to do things in life. The biggest thing is you can't be afraid to fail, because people fail all the time. A lot of geniuses, and I'm being serious, a lot of geniuses have failed. Albert Einstein is a perfect example of someone who failed. He failed school. He was terrible at school, right? There was a man who was known and marked as creating creating the modern day computer. His name was Alan Turner, I believe. His name is Alan Turing. Look up Alan Turing. He failed a lot in life, but he also succeeded because he kept on challenging himself and kept on trying. And that's what I'm trying to work on doing right now. But you also can't be distracted by stuff. You can't be like the Israelites. You can't be like Jerusalem. You can't be distracted by things that are leading you away from success. You can't be distracted by games 24/7. You can't be distracted by social media 24/7. You can't be distracted by someone you're talking to 24/7. You can't be distracted by all these things. You have to actually sit down and do what you have to do. You'll have time for that later in life, but you have to put in work. You have to be bold. God favors the bold. He does. So that's my message for the end of the day. I hope this was helpful to anyone who's watching this. But yeah, you gotta stop letting fear stop you from doing stuff. Oh, if I read too much of the Bible, there is no reading too much of the Bible. Oh, if I work too hard, there is no working too hard. There really isn't. There rarely is. People rarely work too hard. And the people who do experience abundance in something of some sort. They experience abundance of knowledge, abundance and gain of strength, abundance and gain in money. Work hard. I promise you, if you have to think about working too hard, you probably aren't working that hard. There are generally not that many people who work that hard and have to think about it. But anyway, long story short story. Focus on God. Focus on doing things even if you're afraid to do them. Get rid of distractions. Because distractions will build up and make you fear even more. But yeah, this is all from Jeremiah chapter 38 and chapter 37. I think Jeremiah is an amazing book. It's one of my favorite books because, again, I always say this, people, Bible is an amazing story and it'd be an amazing anime. The stuff that goes down in it. So that's my message for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope it's touched your heart like it should. And until then, guys, I'm praying for all you guys out there. Stay blessed with God. Stay close to God. And God bless. Peace.